Hey everybody, we are live. I am Gina from Advantage College Planning. Thanks so much for joining me this evening. I am here tonight to answer your burning questions when it comes to your college applications. This is prime application season time. We had a first round of deadlines that came up on October 15th, and then November 1st is a really big deadline. There are a lot of schools with that November 1st deadline. So I know for my seniors, this has been a really busy time of year. And so I figure there's probably a lot of other parents and students out there with questions as they're getting ready to submit these applications right before that November 1st deadline, or maybe you've already submitted some of your applications and might have some questions about follow-up. So I wanted to hop on tonight and just be here as a resource for you all to answer any questions that you might have about that application process, either as you're getting ready to submit applications or if you've already submitted and maybe you just have a follow-up question. So I will do my best to answer those tonight. So that really is the overall agenda, is to answer your questions. I anticipated, there might be some questions about follow-up, sending in documents, what to do after you submit applications, any questions that anyone might have about just the actual submission process, the difference between submitting an application on the Common App, or should I submit the application through the college's individual application, essay questions, anything like that. So as you are coming in, I am really excited to be here tonight. Again, I am Gina from Advantage College Planning, and we have a good group coming in. So as you're joining, feel free to post your questions in the chat. I'll put up our agenda here. And then also, feel free to let me know where you're coming in from. If you are a student, what year are you? I'm figuring there might be a lot of seniors on tonight. But if you're a parent of a student, how old are your students? Maybe you have younger students and you're just here to learn. But I always love to know where people are coming in from. And then again, also just make sure you're putting your questions over in that chat and I will do my best to answer them tonight. All right, awesome. So first question up that I'm seeing so far is what do I do after I submit my application in the Common App? Yes, that is a great burning question that I'm sure a lot of people have. So after students have submitted their application, the first thing you're going to do is celebrate. And you're going to jump up and down and you're going to be excited and you're going to be really happy that this big significant milestone that you and your student have been working for or towards for so long is finally coming to fruition. Those applications are going in, big relief. So the first thing you're going to do is celebrate. The second thing you're going to do is your student, a couple days after they submit their applications, they need to keep an eye out for emails from colleges. And those colleges are going to be sending them emails. Each individual college will send students an email and they'll say, yay, we're so glad you applied to our university. Here is a link to your application portal for our university. So once a student submits the Common App, they are no longer communicating with that college through the Common App. That transaction is done. Now the student needs to set up their application portal for that specific university. Again, it'll come to their email, set up the portal. And then I always recommend students have some sort of place, either bookmark those application portal sites or create a Google Doc and put links to all the sites, because throughout the process of waiting for the decision, students will be logging into those portals often. So they're going to want to go and submit their application portals. After they create their application portal, they're going to want to submit and track their documents. So if parents, if you submitted your applications back in the 90s like I did when we mailed things in, you just put that package in the mail or gave it to your school counselor and you were done. Nope, these kids still have more to do. So after they submit their application, they set up their portal, then they need to log into that portal and make sure, okay, did the school receive my transcript? Did the school receive my letters of recommendation? Did they receive my test scores if I was sending them, right? So all of that information will be checked off in that portal or not checked off. And that's one thing the students have to look at. A key thing to remember here is that even though everything seems so automated and quick and you submit the application and you get the email and it's all very smooth, there is still a human process involved when it comes to actually physically processing these applications. So if you can imagine working up in an operations office on a college campus and their admissions office, this is a pretty crazy time of year for them. They're getting thousands of documents every day. And yes, a lot of them are coming in digitally, but they still need to be sorted and attached to each individual student's file. And then they have to literally check off a box saying, okay, this has been uploaded, this has been uploaded, for the student to see that that document has been received. So if your student submits an application tonight, and then on Tuesday, they get the email from the college saying, set up your portal, all of their documents may or may not be received by Tuesday, or they may be received, but they haven't been checked off yet. So before your student panics and reaches out to their school counselor in a panic saying, my transcript hasn't arrived yet, or my letter of recommendation hasn't arrived yet, take a deep breath, give it a couple days, because it is a human process on the college's end. So before you go after your teachers and your school counselors, give them a little space. If they said they sent it, it might just take a couple days for that to get processed. And so then those admissions decisions, that's always the next hot question, is when am I going to find out? So that varies from school to school. So what I recommend is go, number one, in those application portals, sometimes it'll tell you your application is complete. You'll hear a decision from us by blank date. Some colleges on their website will say, we release decisions for early action applicants around this time, within this range, mid-December, you'll see, or mid-January. So just make a little note on your calendar of when you'll probably hear back from these schools. That can help release a little bit of stress so that your student isn't checking every day to see if a decision has come in their portal, if they know I'm probably not going to be hearing back from this school until December, January. So those are some immediate next steps after you submit the application. Celebrate, set up the portals, and then track your status in the portals to make sure that all of your documents are received within a couple weeks of the application deadline. So that is a great question. Awesome question. Good way to get us started. So what other questions do we have? I know I've had some people who have been asking, is there a difference between I'm getting ready to hit submit? Does it matter if I submit the application with the college's specific application on their website or the Common App? If they offer multiple platforms for their application, it really doesn't matter. If your student's using the Common App for all their other schools, go ahead and use the Common App. It'll make their life a little bit easier. This is a great question. Okay, so Caroline, yes. So if a college is test optional, but your child took the SAT, should your senior submit the scores if it's in the bottom 20% scores of the range they usually accept? This is a very burning question, Caroline. This is definitely a good one to ask. I would say it depends. The big thing that it depends on is your student. So if you're looking at when colleges receive test scores, oftentimes what they're looking to do is say, okay, do these test scores and the student's performance on this test, does that match the range of what we're seeing from the student on their transcript, right? Is there a match? Because if we have a test score that's really high, but then, academic performance across 4 years, it's a little low, we're kind of wondering what's happening there. Or vice versa. If we have academic performance that's super high and test score that's really not a match for a student who's performing that well academically, we're wondering what happened. Was that test just not a good day for that student? So that would be my first question for you to think about is, okay, if I'm looking at my student's academic performance, is his or her application stronger? Does this test score make their application stronger, right? Are their grades and their test score kind of neck and neck? Is it a good match? Or is this test score a little bit lower than what we might expect for somebody with this academic profile? That's my first thought. My second thought is, it depends also a little bit on the major that they're applying to. So some schools, you'll want to look at their website and look at any specific major requirements that for admissions that school may have. There are some schools that are test optional, but they do require test scores for students applying to specific programs. I see that often with STEM programs. Not often, but I do see that, or for students who are interested in nursing, for example. So those would be a couple of things to consider. The bottom line is, if you feel like the application is stronger with the test score, submit it. If you feel like the application is stronger with everything else the student has going on, and it's optional and it's truly optional, then you don't have to submit that score. Next question is, when might it be best to wait until regular rather than early deadlines? Great question, Tiffany. If your student is freaking out about the November 1st deadline that is coming up in about a week, and they're losing sleep and they're not ready and they're rushing to try to get these essays done and it's not their best work, or maybe they really want to retake a November or December SAT or ACT because the first time they took it, their calculator died, and then they were supposed to take it again in October, and that was disrupted by a hurricane. That's actually a situation I have a student in right now. Then don't rush, right? If that's not going to be your student's best effort, if they're going to feel rushed, if it's adding a lot of extra stress for them to get this application done by this November 1st date, then I would go with the regular deadline, right? It's there for a reason. If your student also can prioritize, right? That's another thing. So I have some students who they have these lists and we say, okay, now that we're in the thick of it and you're trying to balance all these different pieces and all these different timelines, let's prioritize, your top 3 schools that we think, you really want to put in your best application for. And then the other ones, we can have a little bit more time. Or maybe let's prioritize the schools that we know are likely, right? That you feel really confident. I really like this school and I feel confident I would be admitted. Then let's go ahead and get those applications in. So then you can get that really nice emotional boost of getting an admissions decision that says, yes, we want you at our school. Congratulations. Welcome to the group, right? If that is part of your list, which it should be, you should have some schools like that in your list, then maybe prioritize getting those ones in. If you have a student who's applying to a school that offers rolling admission, so that means they review applications as they are received and make decisions as they are received, earlier is typically better, because once they're full, and they'll stop reviewing applications. So those would be some things to think about if you have a student who's kind of coming up on those November 1st deadlines and they're feeling a little stressed. Okay, so Suzanne, my student just took the ACT again Saturday. How soon will he find out results? It's usually a couple of weeks, usually about a 2-week turnaround time. If he wants to do early action, if possible, but he's not sure he'll get the results in time. Yeah. So it'll depend on the college. So some schools, if he had an October 15th deadline, and he's trying to get an early action score in for a school with an October 15th deadline, I would have him reach out to his admissions rep at that school and check in and see if they have a cutoff of how, what the deadline is for them to receive materials to review that score. That's also a great way to connect, demonstrate that interest, reach out to that admissions rep. If he has a November 1st deadline, usually schools give you a 1 to 2 week window to get your materials in. So if the student's deadline is November 1st, then the materials deadline often for recommendations, transcripts, test scores will be around November 15th. But it's always good to double check and reach out to the school. And that's, again, just another way to say, hey, I'm really interested in your school. I want to give myself the best chance. I've just retaken the ACT. I would like those scores to be included. Will there be time, or will I just be deferred to the regular decision round, based on when those scores are submitted? And then their admissions rep should be able to give them that advice on kind of how they should proceed. So, okay, Betsy, yeah, so what is a match? I.e., what GPA matches which SAT score? Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Betsy, that was a little bit vague. And I guess that's information that I kind of have in my head that makes sense that a parent may not have. So if you're looking at the school's academic profile, if you go to Common Data Set, so here's a little inside scoop. If you Google Common Data Set and then a college's name, so Common Data Set X college, you will have access to public information that the schools are required to compile and make available. And that common data set will show you within the past year, about a year, usually it's 1 to 2 years behind, but whatever the most recent cohort is, you'll be able to see what the average admitted student profile looked like. You'll be able to see the GPA ranges, and then what percentage of students were admitted within different GPA ranges. And then you can also see what percentage of students were admitted within different SAT and ACT ranges if the school is considers testing in the application review process. You also can see how strongly they review or consider each element of the application process when they're reviewing apps. So most schools are going to say rigor and grades and academic curriculum are strongly considered. But then you might have a school that considers test scores but doesn't strongly consider test scores. You can also see how important the essays and recommendations and other factors are. And so from that, you can see, okay, my students' GPA, my students' grades kind of fall within this range of the typical admitted student at this school. And then his or her test scores fall within kind of either this lower range, medium range, or higher range. And so that can kind of help give you an idea. I mean, generally, if you have a student who is very high in their class, in terms of GPA or grades and rigor that they're pursuing, then we would anticipate that there would be a test score that was going to be at the higher end of that spectrum as well. So kind of higher end GPA, above a 4.0 on a weighted scale would correlate with a higher test score. It's also helpful to think about, again, what your student wants to study. So if they're interested in studying something STEM related, colleges are going to look more at those math and science subscores if it was SAT or ACT, the math subscore if it was SAT. So those are some things to keep in mind. Okay, planning on applying early to first choice school. Can't apply early decision because of financial aid. Yep. Does that ever impact a school's decision to accept and offer more merit, more need-based aid? So that's a great question, Dawn. And I'm glad you brought that up about early decision. So that's so smart. And I'm so glad that you did your research before your student decided how they were going to apply. So for those of you who aren't familiar, early decision is a binding application plan. So when a student, not all schools offer early decision, but if they do, that school is saying, you can apply to us through early decision. You are telling us that we are your number one choice school above all other schools. If you are admitted to our school, you are coming. It's a done deal. You aren't looking at financial aid packages from other schools. You are not getting admissions decisions from other schools because you're withdrawing those applications. You want to be with us. We want to be with you. It's a match. Moving on. That's a great plan for some students, but for a family who is concerned about how that financial aid package may play out, that can be a little bit of a risky bet. So I'm really glad, Dawn, that you did your homework on that before making that early decision plan. So does this ever impact a school's decision to accept? So it doesn't necessarily impact their decision to admit or not admit your student based on the plan that they apply with. We do sometimes see a little bit of a probability, admissions probability bump when it comes to early decision at some schools, not all schools, but at some schools, because the colleges know that those students are a done deal, they are coming, they don't have to worry on if they're going to yield or not, if the students will pick that college back or not. So it's a win for the college for any students they admit early decision. So sometimes we do see a little bit of an advantage in the admissions process at some schools. In terms of financial aid, so need-based aid, that's going to be based on income, assets, information that you submit through the FAFSA or the CSS profile. That information will not vary depending on early decision versus early action, because that's based on nothing specific with your student's merit. That is based solely on your financial need. Merit scholarship, it depends. So some schools will use merit scholarship a little bit as a yield tool. So as a way to encourage more students to choose their school back, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many students a college admits, it matters how many students pick that college back, right? They have to fill their seats. So some colleges do use merit aid as a bit of a yield tool. So they may be a little bit less generous with early decision admits than early action admits, just because they already know those early action admits or early decision admits are coming, right? But I wouldn't say that that's the general rule. And I would also say that at highly selective schools that are admitting less than 10% of their applicants across all application types, those schools aren't really giving out much in merit scholarship, regardless of which way a student applies, because they don't have to. They're getting their numbers and they're going to have students enrolling. They don't need to use merit scholarship as a yield tool. So I would say you're doing the best that you can. You've made the decision that I think is the best for your family overall. And wherever your student gets in, they will be lucky to have them. So that's great. Congratulations. Very exciting. Any thoughts on when those 10-1 SATs delayed to 10-15 due to hurricane results will be available? That I don't know. That's going to be up to the College Board and kind of how fast they process that information. So I would say, Betsy, reaching out to the College Board updates on their website, or any emails that are being sent to your student would have that information. So I know these kids aren't always in their emails. It's not usually how they're getting their information, but for this college process, that's really where they need to be. Okay, if a college asked for a CSS and we know that we are not going to qualify for financial aid, do we still need to fill it out? Great question. I would say for the majority of colleges, so again, I cannot make a blanket statement that's going to be true for every single school across the country, because every school has their own way of doing things. But for the majority of colleges that require the CSS profile, no. If you are 100% sure that at no time, not only this year, but over the next 4 years that your student would be at this institution, if you are very confident that you will absolutely never, ever possibly qualify for any type of needs-based institutional aid from that school, then you do not need to submit the CSS profile. There are a couple of schools that, and so you should, ask ask the specific at the school. That's another great way to get in touch with your admissions counselor at the school. Look on their financial aid page, reach out to your admissions officer and ask them if this is the case for their school. Do I need to submit the CSS profile or the FAFSA to receive an admissions decision? Do I need to submit the CSS profile or the FAFSA to receive any merit scholarship? There are a small number of schools that this is true for, that if you want to be considered for merit scholarship, you have to submit the forms. There are a few schools that do take a student and their family's ability to pay into consideration when they're making admissions decisions. Again, this is not the majority of schools, but it is something that does come into play at a few schools across the US. But if you absolutely don't think that you would qualify for need, you don't have to submit it. But one caveat to keep in mind is that 4 years is a long time, right? A lot of things can change. So if there's a possibility that your circumstances could change, and then maybe when your student is a junior, you may need to apply for aid for some unforeseen thing happening. Some schools will say, well, you didn't apply for aid when they were coming in as a freshman, so that was your opportunity. Other schools will say, no problem, just submit the documents. So if you have questions about that, or if you think that's something that could occur, I would encourage you to reach out to those specific schools' financial aid offices just to get those details about that individual specific school. Yeah, great questions. Yeah, the CSS profile and the FAFSA, those are required. So if you haven't submitted those and you want to be considered for needs-based financial aid, I definitely recommend looking into those, thinking about considering them. All schools except the FAFSA. So FAFSA is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA. We love acronyms in higher ed. And so that is free to submit to all colleges. And that just really pulls in your tax information and submits that to the colleges. And they'll use that to consider you for federal student aid. Or if you are applying to a college in the state in which you live, you could potentially be considered for in-state aid as well. The CSS profile is through the College Board. And so there's about 200-ish schools across the US, mostly private. Some flagship public schools require that if you want to be considered for any institutional aid based on need. So any of the college's money, if you want to be considered for that, you have to submit the CSS. So not everyone and not every school requires a CSS profile. So yeah, great questions. Awesome. These are such great questions. I really hope everything's been going well and you and your students have not been too stressed. It is a lot to try to get everything done during senior year, this fall semester. It's full of all kinds of, the last first day of school and the last first this and the last homecoming and all of these things. So it can be a really emotional time for students. in ways maybe sometimes they don't even recognize, but I see it. I see their emotions, and then they're taking these challenging classes and they just feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. So give them a hug, tell them they're doing great. And no matter, how these decisions come out, they're going to have some great options and they're going to be fabulous wherever they go. So that's really exciting. So I will be back on November 6th. So on November 6th, which is after that big November 1st deadline, I will be back so that you can ask me any questions you have about that next steps process. So I talked a little bit about that here tonight. Application portals, that's a piece of it that's really important. But there's some other things too that students can just be thinking about to help them prepare for ultimately making that college decision in the spring. So come on back and join me on the 6th at 8 o'clock. If you have some questions about that, we'll be talking about that. And if you found this information in general to be helpful, definitely check us out on our website, advcp.com. We have a fabulous blog, podcast. I post short videos. There's so many great resources on there to help you and your student through this process to make it as happy and calm and successful as possible. So thanks again so much for joining me, and I will see you all back here on the 6th. Have a great night. Bye.